All right, hi day guys. Okay, so I told you I'd show you the actions. So we're gonna sort of start cranial. So your head just sort of rocks and tilts a little bit. So honestly, the only actions that it does is cranial flexion and cranial extension. Then when we get to cervical, we do flexion, extension, and then lateral flexion. You can do that to either side. Um, your mandible, we did this today, but your mandible will elevate, depress, protract, retract, or do lateral deviation side to side. Um, your scapula does the same thing. It does elevation, depression, protraction, which would be coming forward, and retraction, where you're putting your shoulder blades closer to the spine. And then we don't do lateral deviation there. Your shoulder movements look like flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, circumduction, and then if we do rotation, medial or internal rotation brings the limb closer to midline, and lateral or external rotation brings the limb away from midline. Then on the horizontal plane, we can also do adduction or abduction. Your hips do the exact same thing. Flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, circumduction. You can even do it on the horizontal plane, which is harder for me. Medial rotation and lateral rotation. So if we come up here to the elbow, your elbow is a hinge joint. It can only flex and extend, but your forearm can supinate, right up with the sup, pronate down. Your wrist do flexion, extension, and then we do either ulnar deviation or radial deviation, but this is really adduction and abduction. I think that gets confusing. Your thumb can do opposition. The rest of your fingers can do flexion, extension, adduction, abduction. And then at these joints, we can only do flexion and extension. Same thing with the toes. We can do rotation at the trunk, and we can do lateral flexion at the trunk. Our pelvis, or our, well, they really call it pelvis. Your pelvis can tilt anteriorly, which means your butt sticks out, or it can posteriorly tilt, which means you tuck your butt under. So it's this, your ASIS, that's moving. So if it rolls forward and your butt sticks out, that's anterior tilt. And if it rolls backwards and you tuck under, that's posterior tilt. You can also laterally deviate your pelvis. We did hip, we did trunk. I always leave something out. Oh, your ribs. Your ribs can elevate and they can depress. At your knee, you can do flexion and extension. You can also do just the tiniest bit when your knee is flexed of rotation medially and laterally. At your ankle, you can plantar flex and you can dorsiflex, and then you can invert and you can evert. So when you invert, the bottom of your foot is turning in towards midline. When you evert, the bottom of your foot is turning away from midline. Okay, and then your toes move just like your fingers. Flexion, extension, abduction, adduction. No opposition here. Okay? I think I remembered everything, but I may have left something out because I tend to do that. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks.